absolutely nothing happened while you were away. It was completely quiet.
Yes, and yeah, before I left I put a special request for, no environmental news, no announcements, nothing to happen while I was away because, it's crucial that I am here when these things happen.
So offsets, did you hear about this offsets thing?
Offsets, yes, I did. Yes, there was that great piece in The Guardian that Lisa Cox wrote looking into some of the, dare I say, corrupt practices that have been going on with the offset system.
Alleged. All very alleged.
Yes.
But if you didn't catch the story, Lisa Cox has done this fantastic expose in The Guardian that clearly a lot of researchers got into that basically is saying that, well, first of all,
what are offsets?
Yes. Let's explain offsets.
Let's go back a step. Yeah, well, for those who aren't aware, offsets is a very convenient policy, I suppose, in the planning system that allows developers who intend to cut down ecologically threatened communities, important habitat for different species, if they're clearing habitat, that they can then go and buy up an equivalent or a greater amount elsewhere and protect it, and whether it's to put it under a conservation covenant or protect it in perpetuity. But the idea is that I'm going to cut down trees over here, so I'll protect some over there. And you had a very handy analogy.
Right, so I was trying to explain this to somebody, and it's basically like, somebody comes along and says, look, I'm going to kill your son, but don't worry, I'm not going to kill your nephew.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it actually doesn't do anything to add to the protection. I mean, what happens in the offset system is that trees are still being cut down, habitat is still being lost, and what Lisa Cox has sort of exposed is that it's not being done in a way that is sound. It's not only is it not achieving the sort of ecological outcomes that it claims to, but it's also conveniently lining the pockets of a lot of people.
It seems like it's a great business to be in if you can get the work. So this company has, or individuals have done the assessment on a development proposal, and then, hey presto, it turns out they also own the land that works as the offset.
Yeah, and it turns out that that's the land that should be sold, to the developer for the offset.
This has now been referred to ICAC by multiple people, including us, but importantly by Transport for New South Wales. So hopefully we'll see some result on that in the
So what else
months.
did I miss while I was away?
Federal budget the other night.
Yes.
Politics is night of nights.
Were you in the lockup?
I was not in the lockup. I wasn't prepared to drive to Canberra for it. But I got all the salient details.
Yeah.
How much money for climate?
So much money for climate.
ACF did some great research on they did a lot of sort of investigation of the budget on budget night, and it turns out that if you add together the money that the government is spending on climate action and the money it's spending on biodiversity, it amounts to 80 cents for every $100.
Yeah, it's grim. I think for that budget, you want to be in the gas industry really, because they came out on top.
It was a great budget for fossil fuel companies. Bad budget for the rest of us. If you want to eat or survive, then maybe
not a good time.
Not a great budget for you.
Yeah.
And
what else?
Floodplain harvesting.
Floodplain harvesting, yeah, of course.
Now everybody knows about water policy in New South Wales.
Thanks to our summer series. We had our 3 episodes over summer where we went out along the Darling River and visited some of the communities that are dependent on the Darling Barker. So hopefully some of our viewers are familiar with what's going on out there, the over-allocation of water upstream. But yeah, floodplain harvesting was again in the news last week. There was a very important bill before New South Wales Parliament.
Yeah, so the government gazetted a regulation that would basically mean floodplain harvesting was licensed and therefore legal, but it had all sorts of holes in it and all sorts of problems, and basically the biggest problem was going to be that it was going to continue the practice of taking water out of the system. So a number of people in the upper house, Justin Field, who's been a real leader of this stuff, the Shooters, Farmers and Fishers, Labor, the Greens, Animal Justice, disallowed the regulation, which is a parliamentary thing that can happen.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's dead. Like
the issue is very much still alive, because
absolutely.
it does need to be solved one way or the other. It needs to be solved.
Yeah,
but,
and that's what we saw when we were out there. Like floodplain harvesting is having dire impacts for downstream communities, and I guess for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically a practice where landholders in the upper part of the system just take all the water that accumulates on their land, or they put it into dams so that it doesn't make its way down the river.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the bottom line, we need to have a system where you have ecologically sustainable amounts of water running through the system at all times. And then, of course, you need to be able to take water out for farming and for communities and all of that. Nobody disagrees with that. You know, some of the Facebook comments we get is just you know, oh, you hate farmers, or just, no, I like eating. Yeah. Farming is fine. I've got no problem with farming, but we've also got to have, it's in everybody's interest to have a healthy river
including
system.
farmers, and that's exactly what we're saying.
And the Farmers Association have been terrific on this issue. Yeah. It's been a controversial one. But speaking of controversial issues...
Yes, there's a by-election happening in the Upper Hunter. In
the Upper Hunter, which when I was first a union organiser was my patch, if you can believe that. This city slicker was responsible for organising workers in Muswellbrook. Yeah, well, so I know the Upper Hunter like the back of my hand. Yes. But we've got tonight's guest is Warwick Jordan from the Hunter Jobs Alliance. Now, this is a fantastic new organisation that we've been involved in. Or alliance of organisations, as it is. Setting up. Yep. So it's basically some trade unions and some environment groups have formed an alliance to work on sort of transition and jobs issues in the Hunter as climate change necessitates kind of action and change in the economy of the region. And that conversation's really been thrown into light with the by-election. Yeah, so welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to Warwick. Thanks so much for being here. So you're the coordinator of the Jobs Alliance. Tell us, give us a thumbnail. What is it? What's it for? What are you doing? Why is it worthwhile?
Yeah, look, you know, as some of your viewers and listeners would probably be aware, coal's been a pretty hot topic in the Hunter region for probably the best part of 200 years now. And one of the things that has become a little bit challenging over the last few years has been quite a lot of conflict around the industry, quite a lot of concern about what's going to happen in future with coal mining, with power generation, and with some of our related industries as well. And one of the things that was particularly challenging about it was that the conversation has been getting really polarised about people splitting into camps about what they think about the industry or what they think the future should be. And at the end of the day, that's made it really hard to deal with issues like emissions reduction, to deal with issues like needing to get ahead of change so that people in the region have got a good future and continue to put food on the table. And so a few of the organisations that came together to form the Jobs Alliance thought that there was a better way and a different way to have the conversation, particularly identified some common ground between workers and between environmental groups as well. And so that's created a new alliance which has been given the job of trying to improve the conversation in the region and also have a look at what we can do to deal with the economic change coming down the line so people get looked after.
Yeah, great. And it's a pretty unlikely alliance in some ways. You know, I think historically in the Greenie movement, working with unions is something that we've always, you know, tried to do. Who's involved in the alliance, and why do you think it's working?
Yeah, look, it's a good point. I think it's working because there's a bunch of groups who've identified that what's in the best interest of people in the region cuts across some of those lines that have historically been a bit difficult. So we've got organisations obviously like the Conservation Council, Lock the Gate. We've also got 9 unions involved as well, so organisations like the AMWU, the ETU, United Workers Union and quite a number of others who thought that the enterprise was worthwhile as far as saying, look, there's more that unites us as far as our common interest in the region that divides us, and let's try and do something about it to try and get things moving.
Yeah. Should we hear a bit about what some of the candidates have been saying so far in the by-election about the transition?
Well, the key thing here is the world is transitioning and the world wants our coal. So this is a business of selling coal to the world. And while the world wants coal, I think we should continue to sell it. I don't think we should, whether Australia itself wants to build another coal-fired power station or not.
I'm a coal miner and a proud coal miner. I plan to work hard for people's jobs in the region. Every time I open the newspaper or every time I turn the TV on, I see someone having a go at coal miners, and that has to stop. and I'm going to fight bloody hard to make sure it does.
So kind of a couple of interesting takes there from candidates in the by-election, and I don't want to get too much into sort of the politics of the by-election, but do you think that one of the reasons for this kind of culture war, or whatever you want to call it, is that there is just a bit of a lack of understanding on both sides? You know, in a past life, I've done a lot of work with the CFMU mining division, and if you go to the offices in Cessnock, there's a workers' memorial wall there. There's hundreds of names, I think it's 500 and some names on this wall of people that have lost their life in the coal mining industry over the last century. The prosperity of this country and this state was built on coal mining, wasn't it? Do you think that one of the issues is that perhaps coal miners do feel a bit under attack, and we've kind of got to find some common ground?
Yeah, look, I think there's a number of reasons. It's complicated. I think in the first instance, I think there is a lot of people in regional communities who make a really good living and enjoy what they do, and have been able to build a life around these industries and still are. And so I think that's a core driver. You know, the political economy of putting food on the table is really important for people. I think also there are just challenges around how you think about issues that are a long way off in the future. You know, we see it with issues like climate change, but the same kind of issues apply to thinking about economic changes. If things are a long way away, they're uncertain, you've got to take costs now to get outcomes later. It's hard to think about how you're going to deal with it. But also we have seen a level of polarisation that's happened and has made it really difficult to have a conversation about these things. And you know, you do hear concerns, you know, on some sides of the debate. You hear people saying things like coal miners are sick of being attacked, and then you hear other people on the other side of the debate maybe saying, well, we feel like we're not attacking coal miners. But what people hear in places like Singleton or Muswellbrook, when they hear people talking about the coal industry or their concerns about it, over time that's turned into people feeling like they're under attack, and it's hard for people to be able to have a reasonable conversation when they feel like people are going after their livelihoods, regardless of whether that's the intent or not.
Yeah. And you were just saying there about, you know, the difficulty for planning for things that seem quite abstract or quite far in the future. Like, what do you think is the risk? You know, in that clip we saw Lyselle briefly addressing the transition, but you know, very quickly pivoting the conversation back to coal and how, you know, for how much longer we'll be continuing to mine coal. What are the consequences if we don't talk about the transition, or if we don't start planning for it now?
Yeah, look, and there's a bit going on there, and I think this is something that that I've reflected on a little bit, is that there's different realities for people at different times, right? If you're a coal miner in Muswellbrook, or you're working in that industry, and you're seeing 160 million tonnes of coal go out the heads of Newcastle every year, and you haven't seen that change, you're seeing tight labour markets, high rents, all of those kind of things, then does it seem plausible that the show's going to fall over anytime soon? No, it doesn't. If you're an analyst working in a financial institution looking at what's happening with coal plants on the other side of the world in major customers, maybe you've got a different view, right? And so there's different realities there. But I think we've seen enough evidence of what happens to regions where they don't get prepared. And I think it's not a glib thing saying we need a plan and we need to be prepared. Like, we know it's really hard work. At the end of the day, what you're trying to do is redirect the priorities or the changes of capital being allocated or investment being moved in the interests of the community to keep people in work. That's a really hard thing to pull off, particularly in this day and age. And I think the things that we've learnt and seen, even in our local area with big changes, BHP closures, the common example, but there's others, or in other places, we know there's a list of things that can be done. We know that the quicker you get started, the easier it can be. We know that you need a way to coordinate things, and you need to be really good at all the details in terms of supporting workers, retraining, attracting new investment, public investment. And I think the challenge for us in the Hunter, as well as that issue that things don't quite seem as urgent. Our history has been, when there's a crisis, whether it was our floods in 55 or what happened with BHP for a couple of decades, we do tend to pull together, but trying to attack a slow burn problem is hard.
What is that transition? So what, I mean, this almost seems like not even the $1 million question, the billions of dollars question, but what is it rolls off the tongue so easily to say the region's got to reorganise its economy, it's got to diversify, it's got to do all of that. It seems very simple to say, but everyone's not going to get a job as a barista. Everyone's not going to get a job in some sort of new high-tech industry. What, in real terms, could what could a new economic vision of the Hunter look like?
Yeah, it is the multi-billion-dollar or, $100 grand a year putting food on your table question. And look, there's no easy answers for it. In the Hunter, any of your listeners or viewers who've lived there or been there, there's towns like Muswellbrook and Singleton where people argue about how many people are employed, but you're looking at somewhere between 30 and 40% of the working population being employed in the mining industry. And these are, they're not small towns, 15,000 people. And you think about, the challenge to try and find other opportunities. Like before coal mining was big there, they were smallish agricultural towns that did some dairy and did some grazing and a few other things. And so it's not simple at all. It's not like there is an industry that's going to turn up tomorrow that's going to employ all of these people. But we know there are steps that you can take in terms of attracting different industries. And like it's impossible to sit there and say it's going to be X, Y, or Z. It's a matter of getting in there, identifying what advantages you've got, as lots of other regions that have been through those changes have. You look at what you've got. We are fortunate in the Hunter. We do have a strong manufacturing base, which has been built off the coal industry, essentially. And so we do have some of those opportunities, and hopefully we can hang on to those jobs and also grow new ones as well. But that gives us somewhat of a base. But look, it's not easy. The other thing that I think is important to recognise is that we have seen, probably aside from mining, both coal mining, other industries, iron ore as well, and also construction, the opportunities for blue collar workers in the economy have diminished over time. We know what's happened to manufacturing with offshoring and globalisation, and so any changes that we see in our resource industries come on top of that. And I think the cost of not getting it right is around social cohesion and the ability to get things done as a society.
Yeah. I read the other day that just in the context of this by-election, some polling was conducted about this proposal to containerise the Port of Newcastle. And really, you can talk about it in a second, but really we're talking about making Newcastle a port that could be an importer and exporter of goods, not just of coal. And that proposition was supported by 82% in the seat of Upper Hunter, 79% of national voters in the seat of Upper Hunter. It seems, is that a sign that perhaps the community gets it in a way that perhaps the political class haven't quite yet caught on?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. People will support any opportunity that provides a shot for them and their kids to be able to access jobs. That's the reality, and something like the port diversification that creates a bit of infrastructure that can drive other changes and give exporters a leg up, and those things are really quite crucial. Like, I'm not surprised at this number. I'm not surprised. I'm surprised it's not 100%, right? Like, who wouldn't want that in their community and as an opportunity? But I think it speaks to the fact that it is an all of the above type approach. Like, you will see those kind of opportunities. That's a big infrastructure build. It will create opportunities for manufacturing and supply chains. But you'll also see other sectors where some people will move jobs over time. Other people are really focused on what's going to happen with their kids. And I think that's a lot of the time what the conversation comes down to, and where we're trying to have the conversation happen, is that there will be a lot of different opinions on what will happen with the coal industry and other related industries, what should happen, what could happen. At the end of the day, it's likely that over time there's going to be a substantial shift, and if people are thinking about their own working lives and what happens for their kids, then we need to find solutions.
What do you think what does the Jobs Alliance want to see? What would be an ideal pledge from a candidate that they're going to do to, sort of address the issue of the future of the coal industry?
Oh, look, in relation to the by-election itself, it's a point in time, and we've been conscious that, it has been a pretty hot topic around coal industry and other things, and so, whether it happens now or whether it happens at some stage in the future, but really what we're looking for is no one is going to be able to paint a picture of exactly what the destination looks like and how we're going to meet everyone's needs and maintain what we need to as a community. But at the same time, what we're looking for is the steps to get us there. I think people are becoming more aware of change. There's different opinions in the community, but what people are really crying out for is what are those series of steps that show that people are going to be supported, that we are trying to get a handle on these long run problems. And so for us it's things like are we seeing the right type of public investment? Are we reinvesting royalties in trying to create jobs in the region? Are we having something that the Hunter region's been crying out for decades, which is a coordinating authority? When BHP went down in the late 90s, there was calls then by a lot of local stakeholders to create something that would be able to manage change, and authority would be able to help people through that situation. And a lot of it is just about the mechanics. If I'm a worker and I'm looking to do something different because I'm concerned about my industry, where do you go? There's nowhere to go. There's no support for that type of thing. If I'm a new business looking to move to the Hunter region, I want to know that I've got the best people in my corner who can turn up and say, this is where you go, this is how you get help, this is the land, these are the incentives, all of those kind of things. And it's those practical steps, because there's no tick box solution for this stuff. It's just a series of steps that people will understand over time as long as they see best efforts.
A number of people have been saying on the chat, just as they're watching now, that there should be a realisation that there are jobs in renewables. I thought it was extraordinary that Jodie Mackay, the opposition leader, jumped into the debate at the start of the by-election and said, oh, well, I haven't seen any of the jobs that renewables can provide. It seems to me that one of the strategic advantages that the Hunter has got is that it's already connected up to the grid. I want to talk a little bit about some of those proposals, particularly some of the offshore wind proposals and things like that are...
Yeah, look, it's a really good question, because there's an easy answer and there's a hard answer to that, right? Like, I think we know that pound for pound, job for job, there is less jobs in renewables. That's the reality. They're a more efficient way, economically efficient way of making energy, even when you consider firming and so on. And we do have challenges in that if your region is fortunate, then your renewables resource is really strong at the same time as you've got a strong coal resource. Not necessarily the case in the Hunter. Like, we do have some real prospects, and there's some great projects going in. Wind projects, there's pumped hydro projects being looked at. There's some people looking to what the next iteration is around wind offshore. There's a lot of opportunity potentially in that, because you do need a lot of workers. It is at a really big scale. We are a few years away from seeing that start to become a reality, but there are definitely opportunities there. But also, I think there is a reality that we have we've got 13,000 people who work directly in the coal industry, and depending where you start or stop, there's probably another 25,000 or thereabouts who rely on the industry, and there's just not going to be that many renewable jobs, particularly in our part of the world. So I think similar to a container port or similar to some of the other advanced manufacturing or what have you, is it part of the solution? Absolutely. And do we need those renewables there to drive some of those opportunities around manufacturing, get power prices down? Absolutely we do. But not everyone who works in a coal mine or a power station will walk into a job at a renewables facility.
Yeah. And when we talk about a transition, we're not talking about just going from one form of energy production directly to another form of energy production, right? Like, we're talking about a whole kind of complex set of communities. It doesn't necessarily mean going from that to that. When we talk about economic diversification, you're just talking before about incentives for local businesses, the sort of different manufacturing opportunities. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go straight from one to the other.
That's right. And look, classic case in point, I think, is thinking about some of those heavy industry users of energy. Places like BlueScope down in the Illawarra, or Tomago Aluminium, and similar situation in other states where there's big movement in the grid. Emissions are being reduced. The grid is becoming stable in terms of what can be done for households. When you've got big energy users that have different needs, there's a different set of things that need to be done for those users. And looking at those kind of situations, if we can get that right and we can support those existing heavy energy users, then we can create opportunity and put a hand up as a state or as a nation and say, you can do this kind of thing here. You can employ people in these good unionised jobs, and then you can start to attract some of those other sectors, be it batteries, be it renewables, manufacturing, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
How do you think, you mentioned Tomago a moment ago, and Tomago often gets sort of co-opted into this debate a little bit about, well, there's a lot of jobs at Tomago, very, very important employer in Newcastle. How do we kind of build trust in and have a public conversation in a way that makes people realise that this is actually a shared problem, and this is not about sort of some fringe part of society trying to impose its will on the broader population, or we don't care about the jobs at Tomago, or we don't care about aluminium production or whatever. How do we sort of build trust in such a way that we collectively appreciate that this is something we've all got to solve?
Yeah, look, I think the place to start, and to be perfectly honest, the place to start is heavily complicated by capital P politics, but it's about asking the right question before you turn up with the solution. So I think your heavy energy users are a really good example. What is the challenge for them in terms of being able to continue their operations, whether that's around price or whether that's around stability or what have you. So you start from the point of view of defining the problem. In these cases, you look at what the energy market is actually doing and what it's projected to do, what supply is going to be like, what the stability is going to be like, and you start from that point of view and then look to the solution from there. I think the challenge that we have is that everyone piles in with a particular solution, be it gas, be it batteries, be it whatever, and preempts the conversation. But I think it's important to go, okay, if we're looking at a challenge like that one, for example, where we're trying to safeguard a lot of jobs for the long term, at the same time as deal with a decarbonisation imperative, how do we actually tackle those things together in a sensible way instead of piling in with the solutions before we ask the question?
Have you got any more audience questions?
Well, there's some great comments here. I guess one of the good questions, I think, sort of ties in a bit more with the by-election as well, which is, and you just mentioned the sort of the big P politics, and the ability of our political leaders to have this conversation and to drive this debate. What's your take on the by-election? Do you feel heartened by it? Do you feel like it's more of the same? Are there, for those of us who don't live in the region, is there reason to be hopeful?
Yeah, look, I think there is. Is a by-election in a community that has lots of coal miners in it going to talk about coal? Absolutely they are. It's going to be an important issue. So I don't think anyone should be surprised by that and that being a priority issue. I do think there has been some times during the by-election, and particularly the first week or so, where it did go a little bit sideways in terms of a more hostile or polarised conversation than you would have hoped for out of the blocks. But, most, if not all, of the candidates trying to find a way to talk about the reality for workers and the importance of having opportunities in the industry that they work in, at the same time as trying to have a look to the future about how to deal with change. I think in some way, shape or form, most of the candidates have tried to have a go at that. And so I think that's encouraging, and that's probably different to what it would have been a couple of years ago. It's a journey, right? It's a long-term journey as far as how these issues are dealt with, and there's some good signs, there's some not so good signs, but I think we're seeing a bit of movement there.
If people want to get involved with Hunter Jobs Alliance and sort of want to join that conversation, what can they do?
Yeah, so you can check us out at hunterjobsalliance.org.au. You can join as a member there and support what we're doing. You can follow us on Facebook. We're quite active there, and we're looking for people who can provide advice, can provide support, particularly people in our region. We're very locally focused. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is come up with an outcome that's good for people in our part of the world. So I'd really encourage anyone listening or watching at home to check us out. And if this sounds like something you'd like to be involved in, then chase us up, and we're more than happy to talk to anyone.
Great.
Well, NCC, Nature Conservation Council, is a founding member of the Hunter Jobs Alliance, which we're very proud to be, and I'm a founding member myself of the Alliance. I'm really rapt that you're able to join us tonight. Thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for coming down.
No, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
really
it's been
appreciate it.
enlightening to chat to you.
That's all we've got time for. What do you think of our new time slot?
It's dangerously close to my bedtime, Chris, if I'm honest.
We got to get different chairs here. I think we might.
Yeah,
fall off these
recliners
stools.
would be nice. Yeah, no, because then I'll fall asleep.
We can hear. There's a pub next door to our office, so people. We can hear people, literally hear people having a drink and a good time downstairs.
Right, yeah.
So, but we thought now that COVID is sort of hopefully. I don't think I can
Seeing the
even
back
say
end of
the
it,
words
yes. I'm booked in for my shot this weekend. So.
Oh wow,
yeah.
That's exciting. But we thought maybe more people would be this would be a better time for people to sort of settle in with a drink.
That's right.
And watch the show. But of course, it's available on podcast. So
always Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts.
Wherever you find good podcasts.
Voices for Nature. Let your friends know. Give us a review.
And if people want to chip in to support our work, what do they do?
Donate. nature.org.au/donate, because it really is the generous support of people, just like the people watching tonight that allow us to keep doing this work.
Because koalas grow on trees, but
money does not.
Money does not grow on trees. So thanks to everybody who's chipped in, and we're entering into our tax time, so a lot of people make their donations around this time of year, so if you can spare a bit, it does help keep the show on the road. We don't really get money from anywhere else. The only way we can fund this whole operation is by people's generous donations, so thanks very much for that. If you'd like to become a voice for nature, you can not just listen to the podcast, you can be a voice for nature.
Join the club.
Join the gang. And you could likewise do that at nature.org.au and sign up as a regular monthly Voice for Nature. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that's what we rely on. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks with Voices for Nature at our new time. And yes, on Facebook and YouTube again, so be sure to tune in.
Thanks very much.